Hi everyone, welcome back to another discussion in Dharma. I'm Kate and I welcome you here today, and I know that the last talk, if you did have a watch of that one, it was a bit of a heavier topic, but there's a lot of joy and happiness in that, and I think it's a very important exercise for us to all go through, thanking the darkness. So today, however, let's change the dial a little bit. Let's go over to a topic that's a little bit lighter for everyone to enjoy. And it's actually the main topic that drew me into Buddhism. And it is the Buddhist perspective on happiness and all the different types of happiness that we experience as worldly beings. So firstly, to begin this one, I would like to thank all of my Buddhist teachers and influencers and leaders. I particularly send love, kindness, joy and happiness out to Thich Nhat Hanh, Brother Papdung of Plum Village, Tara Brach from the US, and Ajahn Brahm from Western Australia. I love you all. Thank you so much for your knowledge and wisdom and for the beauty that you continue to bring to this world. I also thank my Sangha, my community, all of you that are around me, even though those that I may not even know yet, that may be out there in YouTube land. And I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and whatever has brought you to this point in your life where you may be sitting and watching this, I hope I can provide just a small little nugget of wisdom or gold or a sprinkling of something that will help you in whatever you may be experiencing within your journey right now. So this talk in particular, I find it very important and extremely wise to bring, and I think it actually is one topic that provided a bit of comfort and sanctuary. Growing up in a Western culture, I grew up here in Brisbane in Queensland, Australia, and we kind of grew up in the idea that you're either happy or you're sad. And then there's not too many delineations of moods in between, where, you know, you're kind of, yeah, I'm okay, I'm good, or yeah, happiness is great, happiness is big, happiness is out here. And like, when you experience happiness, it's a big fulfilling thing, and it's usually because something good is happening, or you've been gifted something, or you know, something really good is underway. Or then you're sad and it's bad and it's boring. And I always kind of felt there was a bit of a gap there with the different forms of happiness. I didn't really have an explanation or term or anything like really place on some things where it's more than contentment. And particularly for me, I had been diagnosed, and I continue to be diagnosed with generalized anxiety and ongoing depression, which as a teenager, it affected me very deeply. And growing up into an adult, I'm 35 now, and you know, it's a much smaller chunk of my experience of this world now, much smaller. And that's been years of work and kind of growth. However, when I was getting into Buddhism a number of years ago, it was when I kind of turned a corner and there was a lot of happiness in my world. And I had a great job, I had the partner, I had all these things that I'd added to the list that should have made me happy. And I started questioning why I was still experiencing anxiety and depression, and why I was having these, and even in moments where everything on the outside, everything in the outside world was totally fine. It was a good day, but I was still experiencing kind of turmoil and suffering. I was having moments of suffering, and I wanted to really understand, what are the roots of suffering? Why do we suffer? Where does that come from? How is it formed in the body and mind and spirit? And then really that took me into understanding, and I think one of the most beautiful areas of Buddhism is all the different types of happiness we can experience. And it gave me the opportunity, and gives all of us the opportunity, to expand our understanding of happiness. And I find that once we start understanding all the different forms of happiness that we could be experiencing as worldly beings, if, for instance, you have anxiety or depression, or you're going through some really tough times, you begin to realize that you actually have more opportunities of happiness. And you may be experiencing happiness in the background, but until you really can put a term on it, you can really put a pin in that one and go, this is what's happening right now. You don't fully experience it and you don't appreciate it. And particularly when you have a chronic condition that really overcomes your state and your mind, like depression or anxiety, I find that it's one of those withdrawal disorders where it starts withdrawing your experience and your mindset and your ability to really see the world around us clearly. It starts to pull away. It starts to put a wall or distance between a lot of those experiences that we look around us. And I remember standing in, it's that common kind of thing, and you see memes around of it on the internet where it's, I'm standing in a group of people and it's a fantastic party and everyone's having fun, and I'm so unbelievably sad and alone. So I'm in a group of people and I'm alone. And for anyone that experiences that and knows that feeling, that is such a deep feeling within our soul, and it can make you question who you are as a person, your worth, your value, and it can really open us to a whole line of negative thinking and potentially leading to behaviors that could, in some cases, remove us from this worldly existence. So I think it is extremely important that we consider ways that we can open ourselves up and to expand the experience, and through that is by giving us more options. And that is part of why it's so important for us to go into today's topic and all the different types of happiness. And I hope that this actually helps expand your experience as well. So this one really leads, there's a couple theories and other Dharma talks that have all kind of collaborated for me over a number of years that have led me to wanting to deliver this Dharma talk for us. And it really begins with, it's a fairly traditional Buddhist saying that all living beings desire happiness and we seek to recoil from suffering. I think that's something that we can all understand pretty clearly, that no matter where we are, no matter what is happening, no matter what version of experience or career or life or family or anything like that we're in, we're seeking happiness, any form of happiness, millions of different forms of happiness that there may be, seeking in many different ways. And we want to recoil from suffering. So suffering for us could be as simple as feeling sad, or being in debt, or feeling ill-equipped to be in the position that we're in, or feeling like we don't belong in our workplace, or that we're not good enough for our partner. There is so many different types of suffering we could be experiencing at any one time as a mortal being. And particularly the suffering for me, so I'm a dualist. So in terms of Buddhist philosophy and culture, I believe that we have a divine spirit that's within us and that travels with us continuously throughout all of our various samsaric cycles, so life, death, rebirth. I believe that this is a shell that I'm in this part of my cycle, and that as eventually the shell will die, and then I will return to the universe, and unless I've burnt off all of my karma, I will return to a different shell, and this spirit, this divine spirit, this universal dust, will continue to travel with me throughout time. And that is what our karma is attached to, that divine spirit. So I believe that the suffering that we experience can be suffering that we bring with us throughout the samsaric cycle. It could come with us from past lives into the present, or it could be created in this present experience. And then on top of that, we then add the layer of bodily suffering. So that could be sickness, illness, and disease. And there are so many forms. And then when you potentially have the intermingling of a divine spirit suffering, so a suffering of the soul, the trance of unworthiness, as Tara Brach would put it, for instance, or the ongoing sadness that we feel that we don't belong. When you then have that experienced in the body, you can then create bodily suffering as well, where the shell begins to decay or form illness or disease. So there's so much suffering that can happen for us as humans. And then we add in things that are outside our control. For instance, what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment with the Taliban taking over leadership again, and thousands of people are trying to desperately flee to save themselves and their family, fleeing the life they love and have worked for and feel connection with, and all of a sudden that suffering I can't even begin to understand that form of suffering. And I love you all, and I send loving kindness to you. It's hard to really speak to. However, coming back from that, so in terms of, let's go into the Dharma, where we're thinking around, so our terminology, so we have happiness, and the main term for happiness is sukha, and then in opposition to sukha is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A, dukkha, and it can be pronounced in many different ways. However, I want us to begin by just taking let's just calibrate where we are in our being today. So we've introduced all the different ways, and I'm sure you have your own little mental list of different ways of suffering that you may have, or your understanding of happenings. But let's begin with a small meditation on what is your current contentment level. And when we speak of contentment, for me, I would like you to, I feel it as a sensation in my body, but I would like us to think of, when we're thinking of contentment, and maybe you want to shut down the eyes for a moment and just think of, where does contentment live in your world right now? How much does it take up within you? Are you feeling content in a large portion of your world right now, within yourself, in your being? Or maybe it's feeling more like a distant memory. And if we can just drop in on that feeling and sense where it lives in your body. If we hone in on any small form of contentment, so even if you're in a really dark place, maybe contentment could be your dog or your cat, or a really nice meal that you've had or that you're looking forward to. Or maybe you're in a really good place right now and you are sensing the love you have for your partner or your career. Where does that live in your body right now? And let's just calibrate that. Let's just take a snapshot of how that feels and where that lives in your body. Is it in the chest? The heart? It's in your gut? Maybe it's in the mind. Or maybe it radiates throughout your entire body. How shallow or deep does it feel? When you breathe in and breathe out, does the shape of contentment within your body change? Is it like a balloon in the lungs that moves up and down and bounces side to side a little, maybe amongst the rib cage? If it's struggling or a challenge for you right now to really sense where contentment is within your body, picture something you like or enjoy. Again, that might be something as simple as your pet, or a sunset, or the feeling of the middle of summer when you get to the beach and you take your shoes off and you step into the cold ocean. Maybe it's a sound. Maybe it's the sounds of words that people use to describe us. Or for me, I have the sound of my mum saying, "Katie Coo," one of her little pet names for me. Is there a pet name, or how your partner does a little good night? Or maybe it's as simple as hearing the delivery of an Amazon package happening, saying you've been waiting for it finally arrives. I know that's a moment of contentment for me and my partner in the other room. So when you're ready, I'd like you to return to the space now and just take a moment to, if you could take a snapshot of that and just put that in your back pocket just for a little while. Lemon and ginger tea is a contentment that I enjoy. So I would like to begin with sukha. And sukha in Buddhist philosophy refers to the traditional, what we would understand in Western culture, of happiness, joy, pleasure, and that amazing, brilliant feeling of pure happiness. So that's sukha. I'll come back to sukha because there's many forms of sukha that we like to discuss in Buddhism that Buddha introduced, because we know traditionally we can't all be kings and princes and priests back as it was many thousands of years ago when a lot of the original texts and philosophies were written. Buddhism is designed for the average human, the working human. So there's many forms of sukha that the Buddha went into, and it's been expanded over time, obviously. However, for us, I would like to move on to pamoja. And this is the sense pleasures. So the happiness we get from our senses. And again, I would like us to bring back the relevancy here and understanding that there are so many different types of happiness we could feel at any one time. And always come home to the fact that there's so many different types of happiness. And I hope that when we finish this Dharma talk today, that we are very aware that even when we feel at our worst, there is some form of happiness. Out of the many forms of happiness, there's some form of happiness that we could be feeling. So sukha at the foundation of our understanding of happiness, and then pamoja. So we're separating out happiness and different forms of happiness and really diving into the happiness of sense pleasures. So I would like you to really think deeply now around what is something that brings you, using your senses, so taste, smell, hearing, sight, any of these things, what brings you pleasure? And I would like you to think on one, and maybe we just take a moment to meditate on, for me, I know it's the first mango of summer. That's a sensual pleasure. For me, that's taste and smell and sight. There's a happiness that arises in me because of that. And for many of us, we have so many different things that we love the smell of or love the look of. And once we acknowledge that there is so many thousands of things that we like the look of, we have so many thousands of opportunities to experience happiness at any one time. And no matter what's happening, I'm sure we can then find it. So for instance, I really like the color green. That's a sense pleasure. That's a happiness, a form of pamoja, that I really just like the color green. And so no matter where I am, there's generally going to be a fleck of green somewhere. So maybe you're standing out in a park, or you're going for a walk and there's something terrible happening, or you're in a room and you find the color that you actually love. Maybe hone in on that and dive into pamoja in that moment, and just understand that we can be happy in that moment, and that every moment is wonderful. And by finding these moments of pamoja through our senses, that we can alleviate suffering. And that maybe we don't need to, maybe we aren't suffering as much as we have told ourselves or that we're believing in that moment. So for me, I know also, and I hope you agree, I love a good sunset. I love when the sun touches the mountains in the distance. I look out from my balcony to Mount Kutha, and particularly there's a point in dusk where the mountains go dark and they're just a silhouette, and there's that glowing. It's like the tops of the mountains are just radiating gold, and then they trickle up into pink and a purple and then a blue, and goes up into the sky. That's pamoja of the eyes. What do you like? When you're looking at something, what brings you happiness? I know for some of my friends, they like really beautiful home design. They like clean, sharp, beautiful, slick surfaces like marble or polished concrete. Or they like the things on the table just so. Or they like a candle when it's just dripped, a couple drips, and has a slight tilt around the wick. That's pamoja. So simple, but can bring us happiness. And now we have a word for it. So in the moments where there's something bad going on, maybe we hone in on pamoja. So after pamoja, we then have Mudhita. Mudhita is one of my absolute favorite. So in Buddhist philosophy, Mudhita has been one of the most important learnings for me, and I hope as well for you, because it's not really something we talk about in Western culture, and I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity. But Mudhita in Buddhist philosophy is the happiness we experience by seeing the happiness of others. This one's a big one, particularly if you have depression or anxiety, or you're in a really bad, just experiencing a bad moment. I know that I've stood there amongst my friends at times when I was at my lowest, and there was all this great stuff happening around me, and I was even, involved in doing these amazing things, but I could feel no happiness. because I couldn't sense it within me. And I found that if the happiness wasn't within me directly because of all the things that I thought I should be experiencing around what causes happiness and how I could tap into happiness, just didn't exist. So Mudhita, understanding that you can be happy for the happiness of those around you, and that is a form of happiness. That's a form of joy and pleasure. And I find it's one of the most humbling, where you can just sit back. And I remember sitting across the table from some of my friends, and they were all in deep discussion. And this is going to be something that I feel a lot of us could really relate to. So that feeling of FOMO in the moment, when we're sitting at a table with friends or at a party and everyone's in deep discussion and they're all chatting away and sharing wonderful stories with each other, and you're the only one sitting there that's not in an active discussion at that time. And you can fall pretty quickly into feelings of loneliness and separation and questioning your worth and just wanting to leave and to disengage and pull away. But if we can sit and just be and for me it's still an active exercise that I have to do, because our programming, particularly for women, our programming is that there is something wrong with us and that we aren't good enough and we're not worthy, and it's the trance of unworthiness that we can all live in, and it's extremely important for us to break those shackles. That is so much more to come on that, and please dial into Tara Brach YouTube channel and read her books on this, because it's such an important growth area for us all. However, if we can sit at the table and be amongst friends and just sit back and admire the happiness of them and just be, I'm so happy that they're happy. It's a quiet joy. It's a simple yet pure form of happiness. And I find it, for me, it really has to be one of the most important that we can always come home to. You can always come home to Mudhita. Because even if you are feeling some darkness or some shadow within you, there is always going to be someone that's experiencing good around you in some nature. Maybe you're walking down the road and you're seeing someone walk their dog and they're just loving it, or the dog is loving it. Or you're seeing two friends walk down the street, complete strangers, and they're having a really great day. Maybe that's a good time for us to do this exercise and just go, isn't that lovely that they're having a really nice time? And then particularly have a really good observation of what arises within us. What are we believing in the moments when we activate Mudhita? When we're feeling the happiness that arises from the joy of others, it allows for a very real conversation with ourselves to activate. Because underneath that, when we can go, okay, I'm really happy for them, what am I believing about myself that is blocking me from the other forms of happiness? And I find that a lot of the times, for me and those around me, it's our unworthiness, our belief around unworthiness. That there's something wrong with us. That our existence isn't wonderful, that we are not wonderful, that we are limited, that we are tarnished or broken. That because of who we are and what we have experienced, where we live and what we believe, that there is something wrong with that, and we need to check that one at the door. Because we are all divine and beautiful and amazing. And we are worthy. Every moment that we breathe, we have the opportunity to reboot and to start again, to change that belief. You can actively choose right now to check that one, and I encourage you to do so. Because you are wonderful and amazing and divine, and you are worthy. You are good enough. You are enough. And I think when we let that settle in, it's going to shout a lot of truths, and it really made an impact on me, obviously. And I think it's a very important one for us to come home to. And if you'd like to think of it as your home base, I encourage you to do so. I know I do. So let's expand on sukha. So the teachings of Buddha, because he's dealing with worldly beings, we are, unless you're extremely well off, and in my family we refer to it as if you were dripping in pearls, you're going to be a worldly being that has a job and that you're working and trying to have a healthy, fruitful, joyful life with lots of happiness and surrounded by great things, even though you may not have a ton of money or, worldly opportunity. So we have to go into the other forms of sukha. So the first one in the worldly sukhas is anaya sukha, Ananya sukha. This is the happiness that comes from being free of debt. So anaya sukha, this one for us, it could be as simple as you paid off that afterpay, that little pang of yes, or you paid off your mortgage, or you sold a property and you paid that off, or you owed a friend a debt and you paid that back, or you borrowed money from your parents or something and you paid that back, you had a debt. Or a debt of spirit and you're now free of that. So maybe you've gone through some hard times and that was a debt within yourself, and you're now free of that debt. You've lifted that weight. Maybe for some of us, the weight or cost of a partner that we should not be with, or a friend that is maybe not actually acting like a friend, or that may be going through an experience that is pulling away from the worthiness of the moments that we share together, and maybe you need distance. The cost of that puts a debt on who you are as a human. Pardon the language, but there's also a really fabulous theory around your fucks budget. Once your fucks have been spent, you're then out of fucks, so you can't care. But many of us, and I think the flip side of this, is that all of ours are spent, and then we go into debt, and we're constantly seeking to find more fucks to spend. It's a toughie, but I hope you do appreciate the sentiment that we overspend our state, we overspend our mind space. We create a debt within ourselves, within our being, our soul, our spirit, our energy. And once we free ourselves of that, there's a great lift. That is anaya sukha. Next is athi sukha, Athi. And pardon my pronunciation of athi sukha. However, athi sukha is the happiness from possession of wealth or property. And I think for us, we can all experience that. And it's a brilliant moment where we rent our first flat. And that's an ownership. That's a sort of ownership. So that, you own this space, you're renting it as yours for all that well and right. Or potentially you've bought a property, or you're an investor. Or you are gathering objects and now you own that computer that you've always wanted, or you can go ahead and buy that halo light that you wanted. There's those moments of happiness. And it's a funny one because as a Buddhist, generally we go, ooh, attachment, ooh. All these things feel really icky when we're trying to remember that our goal is to release ourselves from attachment. Because when we're attached, it causes suffering. So just let it kind of sit and settle a little bit within yourself, because that one can be a funny one. It can be a bit itchy, like an itchy jumper, but it's worldly and it's something that we experience. And if we just accept it for what it is, we can go, that's a happiness. Okay, and just, it's a happiness. Obviously it has bounds, but they're a happiness. Next is Bhoga Sukha, Bhoga Sukha. And this is kind of a leveling up. And it's when the joy of a possession evolves into the joy of experiencing and enjoying those possessions. So not only when we're starting to collect things, or maybe we've bought the property that we wanted, but then you get to actually sit back and enjoy it. So you enjoy having space, or finally having that balcony to sit on, or a room to put your office in, and you're not crammed in that little cupboard or in the lounge room with your headphones on trying to work in a corner. You can sit back and enjoy having those possessions and actually experience them. That's a beautiful moment. Because sometimes we can get caught in the trap of collecting, getting all of these things and never using them. And that is the flip side of some of these sukhas, where we think we're going to find happiness through the collection of wealth, but they actually just cause suffering and waste. So little lessons for us to think on. And then the final sukha for worldly sukhas, and I'm definitely not going to be able to say the pronunciation correctly, but Anavaja Sukha, Anavaja Sukha. Anavaja Sukha. And it's the happiness that we abstain from deeds that lead us away from the truth. So the happiness that arises within us when we do the things, or more so don't do the things that we know are going to pull us away from our one truth, that we are divine and that we are pure and happy and we have everything we already need, for instance. So that's a big one. However, to go into this a little deeper and to make it a little more real for us, we can then think of the comparisons of sukha. So sukha and all forms of happiness have bounds and changes, and I think once we really consider how far they can all go, it really helps translate this for some of us. So I think there's an important task here, and so I'd like to share some of these comparisons with you. So you have the happiness of possessing a home or object, and then the happiness of homelessness, say for a nun or a monk. So the same form of happiness can exist in many different ways. And within the Buddhist philosophy, we would say one is better than the other. If you can experience the joy of not having these possessions and the home and everything that comes with it, the joy of the freedom, which you would have also experienced the freedom of debt, of that possession and home and wealth and property, to be truly free and living happy without it. We then also have the happiness of enjoying the possessions, and then the happiness when you transcend the need for possessions and you gain the same satisfaction without the possession. So maybe it begins with, I need a really comfortable apartment with all these things. Nice couches and cushions and desks and a fancy TV and all these things. And that is one way that you grow your happiness over time. And then you reach a point in your life where you strip that away and you give away many possessions and you go, I'm happier with less of the clutter. I don't need those things to feel the same level of happiness I did. And that's a really lovely feeling. So that's a nice little comparison. I like that one. We then have the happiness of the body and worldly sensations versus the happiness of the mind. So, for instance, we have the happiness of the body, and maybe it's when we're getting fit or feeling at our best. And then we have the happiness of just enjoying our mind and sitting with our thoughts. That's a pretty big difference there. Particularly when the body is a vehicle that we use for distraction. Maybe when we're feeling stressed, we use our body, or we change our body state to distract ourselves from our mind. And when we realize that we can just sit with the mind and become a friend to our mind, that's pretty powerful. And then finally, we have the happiness of indulgence versus the happiness of restraint. I know for me and for many people, it can come from you get into a habit of indulging in alcohol, coffee, maybe drugs, fast food, indulgences of the worldly experience. And then we start feeling the happiness that comes from not having those things in our life. How much better we feel the next day if we haven't had those couple glasses of wine on Friday, and how much we can enjoy our Saturday or our Sunday. It's a really beautiful moment and extremely important. And so these are all the levels that we can reach within our happiness. So our happiness is constantly evolving. And again, through our Buddhist philosophy, we can really dive into different levels. And you're never void of different types of happiness. You have a multitude of happiness available to you at any one time. So I'd like us to finish today with a meditation in the art of suffering well. And this is a Thich Nhat Hanh lesson. So he's to me the global leader in Zen Buddhism, and he would agree. And he has a lesson in suffering well and taking care of our suffering. And there's a concept that Tara introduced on this, where it's when you're suffering, do you lean into destruction and distraction, or soothing and calming? So if you're feeling stressed or you've had a big week, do you indulge in things that destroy the spirit and the body, or make it a lesser state than what it is? So maybe alcohol or drugs, for instance, or distraction through noise and phone and scrolling. Or do we soothe and calm? Because it's easy to go into destruction and distraction. For me, it's the habit. It's taken a while, and I think it's a journey we'll all go on, where we need to lean into soothing and calming. Maybe when we're at our most stressed, lying on the floor of a quiet room might bring us more happiness and joy and resolve and good feelings, rather than cracking that bottle of wine. Or for me, I now go to a yoga class on a Friday night, because I know there's a gap of time that I finish work and I'm pretty keen to have a wine, but now I'll go to yoga instead, and I pass that and I go home and have dinner, and then after that I'm too full, I don't feel like drinking. Occasionally I'll still have a wine, that's fine, but the habit is less required. I find there's more ways to soothe the impact of the week. I expanded it, and I know that we're all very capable of doing such a thing, and it's not going to be mind-blowing to anyone. However, these are all options we have. So let's meditate on this a little bit. If you like, to shut down the eyes and calm the mind. And I would like us to begin to ask ourselves a question that Tara Brach asked in a Dharma talk that I was listening to recently that I really loved. And it's firstly, what do I hitch my happiness to? for you to be happy, what is required? These could be possessions or people, a certain bank balance, maybe a freedom from debt. Maybe it's friends or a certain number of social gatherings a month. What do you hitch your happiness on? Or maybe you just sense happiness deep within yourself. And just happiness exists in your chest. And maybe if happiness exists within you, is this hitched on the state of your body? Your body's capabilities? There's no judgment on these moments. And I would like us to take maybe it's a challenge to not judge any of these thoughts that arise. Let them just arise like clouds in the sky. Just let them float by. Now, how do you outsource your happiness? A Buddhist monk in a TED talk asked this question. And it's a powerful one. Do you outsource your happiness? So this could be someone has to be nice to you, or you have to be shown certain things from other people or groups. Or maybe a certain number of likes on your Instagram. Again, let these thoughts arise without any judgment. Let them float by like clouds in the sky. And then finally, I would like us to take a moment just to think of a previous time where we may have been in, say, a social situation where we weren't feeling happiness and we were feeling resentment, maybe, or negativity, just the pangs of jealousy even, that others were happy and we weren't. And I want us to concentrate on what were we believing about ourselves in that moment. What did you believe about yourself? Were you unworthy? Maybe you weren't good enough to be in that moment. Again, let these thoughts rise, bring them into the realm of awareness, because once we're aware of them, I want you to let them float up in front of you and see them for what they are. These things are real in that moment, but they are not true. Because we are all worthy. We are all exactly how we need to be. We are perfect as we are. You are worthy. You are enough. Those thoughts, as they float up in front of you, they're illusions. They are delusions. I want you to take a nice deep breath. let it fill you up. And as you exhale, release those thoughts, release those delusions. And on the next inhale, say to yourself, I am enough. You are beautiful and divine. You are strong. You are wanted. You are needed. There is so much happiness available to you. And once we discover all of the different forms of happiness, and I hope through Buddhism you find all these different types of happiness and how they may enter your world and make your day brighter. I hope it lets you recoil from suffering just a little bit more. I see the divine in you. I love you. You're amazing. Namaste.